Good evening, and welcome to another segment of A Voice from the Margins. I'm your host, Ajamu Baraka, and we are coming to you again this evening on Thursday at 8 o'clock, as we do every Thursday. And as always, we try to bring to you very interesting conversations, individuals, personalities, issues for you to be able to be exposed to, critique, analyze, and think about. So tonight we have a very important guest with us. We have with us Akeem Browder, who is an activist in his own right, someone who is now contemplating and attempting to run for mayor in New York City. And we're going to talk with him and talk about his story, what had brought him to this point, the kind of work he's involved in terms of the criminal justice reforms he is known to be a champion for. And then we're going to talk about why he is attempting to bring this struggle to a larger audience, if you will, and attempting to penetrate the electoral arena and to do something that very few people have the nerve to do, and that is to run for mayor, for mayor against someone who is a very powerful individual and someone that has significant support still to a certain extent in New York City. So Akeem, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me, Baraka. And just real, I was saying thank you. Thank you for having me. You can hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes. Thank you, Akeem. So let's get right into it, Akeem. So, you know, we tell us a little about your story. What got you into this work?
So, I mean, I'm sure everyone, and if not, I can remind that my brother Akeem Browder was a victim of the criminal injustice system that we have here in not just New York, but in America. But essentially, New York definitely played a strong part in why my brother isn't here after the suicide that he attempted after serving 3 years on Rikers Island, a very notorious jail that is cleverly entitled Gladiator School. And so my brother innocently, because you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, and yet our black and brown skinned bodies don't get that privilege, although that's a privilege of a citizen in America. And so they accused him of stealing a backpack, which I didn't know the penalty for stealing a backpack could be 3 years in jail, or the equivalent of your life. But this is what inevitably pushed my family to be not just activists, but activated and in a position to do something so it never happens again.
So Akeem, let me jump in real quick. So your brother was accused of a crime. He was incarcerated. He was given an opportunity to plead out if he would only admit that he in fact was guilty to some crime. He refused, and as a consequence, he ended up sitting there on Rikers Island for 3 years, waiting, in fact, for a trial. Correct?
Yeah. Yes, that's definitely correct. But people that never been in jail, I think it's beneficial to understand that waiting in jail doesn't mean you're just sitting there. You're fighting for your life.
Yes.
And since he took a stance to make the system work for him instead of just pleading out, which 98% of the population plead out,
Exactly.
what he did was take a stance against it, and they took a stance against him, inevitably, where they starved him, they beat him, they put his life at jeopardy, and they put him in solitary confinement. They also neglected his mental health, and in Rikers, they taught him how to commit suicide, because he's never committed suicide or attempted while he was home.
And he was, in fact, in solitary confinement for more than 2 years, correct?
More than 2 years, over 1,000 days. And for the longest stretch at one point, for a 16-year-old or any person, for the longest he did was 8 months in solitary.
Yes.
8 months without
And we've
feeling.
seen, some of us have seen some of the horrific images from some of the attacks that he was subjected to by from other inmates. He was subjected to attacks from the guards, and during all that period, um, he still maintained his innocence and was still demanding that he, in fact, either drop the charges or drop or go to trial. Now, many people listening to this will wonder what happened to the notion in this country that you have a right to a speedy trial. Is that right? Does that right exist there in New York?
No, actually, and I'm glad you brought that up. In New York, which in the United States we have the right to a speedy trial, which is called a speedy trial law. Every state has a version, which is still the speedy trial, but it's a version of the speedy trial nonetheless. Texas is actually the only state that has the constitutional speedy trial as it was set out. New York is the only state in America that has no speedy trial, and what they have in place of it is what's called the ready rule. The ready rule is simply as it's put: when we're ready for you, we'll get to
Mm,
you.
mm. And so, just to sort of make sure that all of our viewers, because some may not be aware of this case. So, after this horrific experience, the state finally dropped the charges. He was released. But tragically, 2 years later, he then was successful in what you said, one of the lessons he learned in terms of attempting to commit suicide. So he took his life. He took his life, and then soon after that, you had another loss.
So Khalif did inevitably, and it was actually a year and a half later. Um, he did end up, because when he came home, I mean, we didn't have to worry about his mental aptitude as far as going into college. He got his GED when he came home. He didn't get to make his graduation. That's one thing that they took away from him. We didn't get to see our brother graduate, or his mother didn't get to see her son graduate. These are things that people don't realize. When your son does time, you do time. The family does time. The community is doing time, because that lack of having him there could have been something super great for. And because we know black and brown skinned people, we succeed at everything we do, and we put our minds to. We are truly like remarkable. And yet my brother proved that when he came home. He got his GED on his first try, passed it, then came home and had a 3.7 GPA.
Hmm.
So
And
when
what did happen to your family after he came home?
so what we were left with was to pick up the pieces, meaning the Department of Corrections broke him into a lot of different parts, and in the mental health capacity, and then actually in no capacity whatsoever did they um, show any help or
Hmm.
give any help. That the family then had to pick up those pieces and try at something that we don't really know how to do as a family that works for a living just to keep a roof over your head. And so we did what we could, or tried what we could, or attempted, but inevitably Khalif took his life by hanging himself, which he was taught on Rikers how to hang himself and take himself out. My mom found him hanging from the air conditioner cord out his window in the backyard, and had to cut her son down um, off the noose that he made. He, my mom then suffered anxiety, heart attack after heart attack until October 14th, went into the hospital, and by the next day, for a heart attack actually, um, and it's truly understood that she suffered a broken heart. She ended up having 11 heart attacks in that hospital.
Mm.
11.
And so you lost your mother soon after you lost your brother, all within a span of what, 16, 18 months.
Yes.
And as a consequence of that, you began to take up the work of attempting to be involved in the movement to shut down Rikers Island. Talk a little bit about that work, Rikers Island, and the movement to shut it down.
So Um, when it comes to Rikers Island in New York, a lot of people know it by name. We as New Yorkers, and a lot of people who are in jail that go to Rikers to face other crimes that they may have, or charges that they may have. We know it by they know it, or we know it by firsthand experience. If you're a black and brown skinned person, but for those that's out of the country or out of the state or even outside the country viewing this, Rikers Island is notorious for corruption, and abuse and neglect and um, the culture of violence. So um, what happens is I attempted to start, or not attempted, I started a grassroots organization called Shut Down Rikers.
Mm-hmm.
With Shut Down Rikers, we actively marched in the street, um, said the names of those people that matter. When it comes to Black Lives Matter, I also started the abolition sector in New York of Black Lives Matter, to bring light to the public that the newscasters don't, that the public news in New York doesn't. And so, with shutting down Rikers, we have a mayor right now, currently, the incumbent, that is feloniously and just giving lip service about shutting down Rikers, but he has no plan. His thought process is we're going to shut it down in 10 years, and it's going to take a lot of money, which is $10.7 billion, which then falls on the people. Again, we the people have to pick up the pieces because that money doesn't come from government. It's raised taxes, and we have to raise that money to shut down a facility that we want shut down. When we could do it in what I came out with a 3-year plan, and it doesn't really take 3 years, it takes 3 months really, but feasibly 3 years to shut down Rikers where it doesn't burden the people. We have jails all throughout New York, and in those jails, they're less than half percent full to capacity, and some of them have half full to capacity. That means we have beds, so we could take people who are on Rikers for non-violent crimes like jumping the turnstile because it's too expensive to pay, and our kids are the ones doing these minimal crimes. We could take them off of Rikers. We could take homelessness out of Rikers and finally provide or meet them where they stand. And then the mental health aspect. There's 60%, 68% plus of those people on Rikers that are considered mentally ill. And with that population, we have facilities already in place. We just need to start seeing the population. And then the remainder, which is 20%, can be put in those facilities. Now, me telling this to companies that really, like lobbyist companies that really just want to financially benefit off a 10-year, $10.7 billion plan. Well, this is where we get corporations involved because they want to privatize the jails in New York by also disenfranchising people in New York because they want to open up 4 new jails in New York, 4 new jails with 5,500 beds each. You're really just creating a new jail and hiring middle class workers to be officers.
Exactly. So your work in attempting to shut down Rikers and to address some of the issues related to the criminal justice system, including the absence of a speedy trial requirement in the state of New York, then led you to consider running for mayor. Talk to us a little bit about that. You're attempting to run as a Green Party candidate. Talk to us about that and what you need to do in order to be in a position to, in fact, run against the current mayor of New York.
So, when it comes to running for mayor, just for myself personally, I know that my background would be a obstacle to overcome because when it comes to black and brown skinned people, we easily get caught up in the system. The system from school to prison pipeline, the adoption system since I'm adopted, and then the criminal. We could even go into the unemployment system. And so I have a criminal background. I was suffered from the hands of the Department of Corrections and the injustice system. And so um, I knew this would be something to overcome. But what I'm running for here now is something that is far beyond what we see me as in New York. I'm running against the status quo. As a Green Party candidate, I'm not only looking at the injustice system, but the immigration system, which the justice system has a direct hand in. The
Mhm.
unemployment rate, the justice system has a direct hand in. It's just how we pick up these pieces and put it together so that we can see where we have our problems. The Department
Before
of
we
Education.
before we get into the issues that you are in fact running on, because you do have a platform. Um, what is the process you now have to what the hurdle you have to get over in order to be able to run?
So I'm a Green Party candidate, and sorry I didn't actually get to that right
That's
away.
right. Yeah.
Um, I am a Green Party candidate that's running for mayor. So what that means, I can get signatures in every borough of New York. That's Bronx, Brooklyn, Staten Island, Queens, and Manhattan. Um, in these boroughs, I need to get into the debate, into the ballot. I need 400 signatures from Green Party candidates. The conflict with that is we've had a two-party system for too long.
Mhm.
And what that means is they have clever terminology like primaries, as though we are not a primary. We are a third-party candidate, which Republicans used to be third-party candidates back in '49 anyway, when they fought to get themselves as a primary. However, me, a Green Party candidate, that means getting signatures from candidates that's Green Party only to be on the ballot. There's only roughly 7,800 candidates, so you can't just walk on the street and find a Green Party candidate anywhere like you can for a Democrat. So we need people to come um, and seek out. This is election season, people. So we know that we're in a position where a Green Party candidate is running. We know that we should contact where Akeem Browder at gmail.com or Akeem Browder 20. I'm sorry, it's Akeem Browder at Akeem Browder 2017 at gmail.com or um, Akeem Browder 2017.org. Where's the website? Or call us up. We have a call-in number that you can call, which is, I can give it right now, which is 646 597 1445. You can call us and we can meet you where you are. Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, Staten Island, or the Bronx. We can meet you where you are so that we can get your signature, so that we can get ourselves on the ballot.
So, Hakeem, I think you provided a solid foundation for and background for what brought you to this current moment, the kind of issues that you are concerned with in terms of the criminal justice system. We'll talk about some of the other issues you're concerned with regarding a broader platform for the people of New York. But what we're going to do, we're going to now turn this over to our viewers. As you know, we open this up and allow for the viewers to pose questions, and we'll take some comments, and that gives you a chance also to elaborate on whatever issues or information you would like to share with our viewers. Gretchen made a comment that is really outrageous what's going on and what you are in fact sharing with us. They did mentally and physically torture him. They drove him, in fact, to suicide, and that her heart is in fact broken. And that's a number of comments that we're seeing from our viewer audience. Um, Lou says that health care for all also has to include care for our mental health. Is that something that you also are going to address as a candidate and as mayor in terms of a more comprehensive understanding of the kind of healthcare requirements that are there in the city of New York?
Absolutely. The issues that we face in our communities, in the disenfranchised communities that don't get our voices heard, we have to start speaking up for issues like this. So in the healthcare field, um, we're not seeing healthcare for all, and the disenfranchised being the mentally ill. Um, when it comes to their health, actually, I'm doing a forum in Manhattan um, that they can come out and speak to, so that I don't have to waste the viewers' time. Immediately, we can actually be followed for our upcoming events on Akeem Browder 2017 at .org, um, where they can see where our current events are, so we can get into those debate on those issues in detail.
Mhm. Hakeem, a very important question came up. Um, John David says, or raised the question: do you have to be a New York resident to sign at the website?
So you do, unfortunately. This is a mayoral candidacy for New York City, and so it is for New Yorkers.
Okay, and 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 the process is that you have to have minimum 400 current Green Party members to sign for you. But it's not just signing. In the process of getting them to sign, you also have to have those signatures witnessed by a current Green Party member. Correct?
That's correct. So in New York, a Green Party member is extremely scrutinized. I already become um, or received backlash when it comes to the campaign finance board. We put our paperwork in for matching funds, and my treasurer put it in, definitely put it in, and yet they haven't received the paperwork. So I missed the deadline for matching funds. These are issues that, I mean, it's a bias issue, but how do you prove it? How do you have a system that can literally disqualify you if they didn't receive what they say they didn't receive
Mm-hmm.
um, on paperwork? So when it comes to our signatures, um, we have to have a witness of a Green Party candidate to one, witness the signature, but then two, also to witness it being done the correct way. So your husband can't sign for the wife, because then the signatures will look the same and both will be disqualified. Examples like that.
Okay. Okay. And so you have to get these signatures, and of course, you have to probably get more than 400 just to make sure that you have that minimum number. And you have to have those signatures by what date?
So I have to have those signatures. We have an internal deadline on July 8th, which is roughly not even 2 weeks now
Yeah.
to come. And then the hard deadline is actually July 13th, where we must have our numbers in. And so
Okay.
right now we're roughly halfway. We need
Mm.
400, but we're halfway for deadline purpose. I mean, for minimum purposes. But we have 7,800 greens in New York, so we're looking to have at least double that,
Mm.
triple even, because it gives a stronger appearance that you didn't just meet the minimum.
Yeah. Brother Hakeem, you had to live the life in New York. You came up in the streets of New York, and even at one point, you ended up being homeless. And as a consequence of that, you have some real concerns about how the homeless are treated in New York. Talk a little bit about what you would do as mayor to address the issue of homelessness in that city.
Thank you for bringing that up. Actually, as a New Yorker, I faced 3 times of being homeless.
Mm.
Um, it doesn't help that I'm a felon, or what I call a person justice impacted, because previously incarcerated, con, um, or felon are dehumanizing words. I'm a citizen. I have my full rights restored as long as I'm not on any supervision, in which I'm not. And so um, what happens is when it comes to the homeless, our kids in New York actually, there's only one facility in New York that has a housing unit for the youth, which houses 5,500 beds. However, those 5,500 beds are full. That's the first problem. They're full every day, 5 days a year.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, those that can't make it there have to sleep somewhere, and they can't go home because parents ended up not being able to raise their so-called out-of-control teens, and so they called the police. Because who else could they call? Right now, we don't have community policing in our neighborhoods, which we need. Community policing, where your neighbors police each other. But they call the police then refers them and brings them to jail. They have to see a judge. The judge sends an order of protection. That order of protection, now you can't go home as a child. But you also can't go to the shelter because it's full. Where do you want them to sleep now?
Right.
14th Street, Union Square, the train station. They're then going to get picked up and put in jail. And if they do it 3 times, here's another dehumanizing or demonizing term for our black and brown skin. They are considered predicates. After 3 times,
what does that mean?
So a predicate is a 3-time what they call. I mean, they're basically playing baseball with us. 3 strikes, you're out. Predicate is if you do it 3 times, the same crime, it then becomes a felony.
Okay.
Or if it's a felony crime that you did 3 times, you're in jail for life.
Mm-hmm. So now you have actually also, I mean, beyond being homeless and living the life that many of us have had to live and growing up in the streets, you actually also had to do some time. And one of your concerns too is what happens when people actually come out. I know you're concerned with and have some ideas around one of the other issues that you feel that people need to address, and that is issues of reentry. When people come back to their community, how they are reintegrated or not reintegrated into their community. In the last minute or so we have, talk a little bit about that.
Well, real quick.
Issue of reentry.
Yes, real quickly. Reentry, for people that don't know, are usually 501c3 not-for-profit corporations that want to see to it that the people coming home get the services that they should be accessible to them. I'm a 501c3 because I have the Akeem Browder Foundation, which is a not-for-profit, and it's with Exodus Transitional Community, which does that work for the last 23 years. But we have to burden the community and the people around the world, around our cities, to ask for money to run these kind of facilities, which is the government's job. Yeah, we can help out, but the government predicates on us and hunts us down, puts us in prison. Between this year and next year, we have the most people coming home from these 20, 30-year bids from back when I was a kid for taking these drug felonies when we started the war on crime. They're coming home this year and next year, but we don't have jobs for them. We don't have housing. We don't have health care for them. I mean, as a felon, you're not even privy, or as a returning citizen, you're not even privy to community or public resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Akeem, we only have a few seconds left, and we just basically scratched the surface. But take us out in terms of just very briefly talking about what you want to do as mayor, and then how people can follow up to get more information and to support your candidacy. And let's do that in about, unfortunately, about 20 seconds.
So real quick, I want to help the disenfranchised. The black and brown communities are tired of putting the same people in office that don't look or represent us, don't know what it feels like to make minimum wage or 10 to 15,000, or live in affordable housing, or have to struggle with health insurance, or have to feel the fear of immigration. And there's many, many issues. But I'm here to bring equality, justice to everyone.
Very good, very good. And you all are organizing. You have a base in that city. And so, Akeem, want to thank you for joining us this evening. Um, as I said, we just scratched the surface. And as all of you know who come to this show, we try to bring a variety of issues and perspectives because we believe that people can think and analyze for themselves. We think it's important that we have an educated populace here in this country. And so, we're going to continue to do that. That's why it's called a voice from the margins, because this social system creates situations where many of us have to exist in the margins, but we're not going to stay in the margins. Our responsibility, our task, is to build powerful people's movements and to shift the center to the margin, to transform the society. And people like our dear brother here is involved in that kind of work. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, brother. And we're going to be again coming to you next week at the same time, same place, for another show, A Voice from the Margins. We also would like for you to be aware of the fact that Jill Stein will be speaking with Steph Caperdale, who I interviewed last week, who's running for governor in New Jersey. So that show, I think, is covered up next. So stay tuned, stay involved here on the Green News Network, and we'll see you again next week for another Voice from the Margins.